and then we'll bring you up.
Let's sit down.
Yeah. Chloe. You'll cue me when you're ready. Yeah. All right, good evening, and welcome to A Black History of Electronic Dance Music, the lecture series at Harvard University, sponsored by the Harvard Mellon Urban Initiative. This series is an adjunct to Afro-Amer, African American 146X, the course, which explores the rich contributions of Black people to electronic dance music. We investigate how this genre, often associated with Black, queer, femme, and non-binary individuals, has underpinned communities and economies, with discussions spanning cities like Chicago, Detroit, New York, and more. We are pleased to close out season 1 of this series at the esteemed Hip Hop Archive and Research Institute at the Hutchinson Center for African and African American Research here at Harvard. Today's session, the 4th of 5 lectures in our inaugural season, features Frankie Decaiza Hutchinson, a leading promoter of Black electronic music based in New York City. Hutchinson will deliver Creating Black Ecosystems Through the Festival, a lecture encapsulating the wide sweep of her cultural organizing representing women and non-binary DJs, as well as her curation of the Dweller Electronic Music Festival. Dweller will hold its 5th year of events in the city from February 20th to the 25th in 2024. Hutchinson's work and organizing, alongside a deep bench of musicians, artists, and other promoters, has garnered the attention of major publications, including Pitchfork, Rolling Stone, and the New York Times. For our audience here and online via our YouTube live stream, we'll have a Q&A session after the talk. A recording of this talk will be accessible on our webpage via this QR code. Online attendees can use YouTube's chat to submit questions, while in-person attendees can raise their hand and an assistant will provide a mic. Keep questions brief for broader participation. Our website hosting these talks is now live at bem.aas.fas.harvard.edu. There, you will also find a link to our mailing list to keep up with future updates. Please visit to view our past 3 lectures. You can also find a link to our mailing list. We encourage you to add your email to receive other important announcements related to the study of electronic dance music here at Harvard. Mark your calendars too for our last lecture of season 1 and our fall 2023 semester. On December 5th, 1 week away from now, author of Creating a Black Counterculture, a book about Detroit techno's history and global influence, will lecture on the book and spin a live performance of the LP Texodus. This has been an exciting season of talks, and I can already tell you that our class has been enriched by the intellectual generosity of our esteemed guests. We are tremendously thankful to our co-sponsors in the Charles Warren Center for Studies in American History, the Mahindra Humanities Center, the Department of Music, the Standing Committee on Theater, Dance, and Media, the Committee on Degrees in Social Studies, the Department of Anthropology, and the Department of Art, Film, and Visual Studies. Now, to introduce today's speaker, we aim to have a student in Afro-Amer 146X introduce our esteemed guests. Today, Chloe Colefianu, a Harvard College senior, will introduce Frankie Decaiza Hutchinson. Chloe Colefianu is an interdisciplinary scholar studying myth, the nation, and the African diaspora. Currently a senior at the college concentrating in social studies and African studies, her research is deeply centered around archival work, reading, and widening the gaps between what is there and what is not. This attention to the archive also influences her artistic endeavors, especially as a member of Harvard Radio Broadcasting, where she hosts 3 regular radio shows across genres, as well as serves in various leadership roles for the station. As a Learning Lab undergraduate fellow at the Derek Bach Center, she focuses on audio production, teaching skills, and developing pedagogical frameworks for new technologies. And her passion for music and sound manifests in her work, creating podcasts and through her music journalism with the radio station. And I can say that Chloe is a fantastic student. So please help me warmly welcome Chloe to the stage.
Good evening. Frankie Decaiza Hutchinson is a co-founder of Discwoman, an agency focused on representing and promoting women and non-binary DJ and producer talent. Discwoman is in Discwoman, in no small part, has created a sea change in contemporary discourse surrounding participation, parity, and visibility across dance music. In 2017, she co-founded Dance Liberation, an organization dedicated to repealing a 90-plus-year-old dance ban in New York City that was successfully overturned. She is the founder of Dweller Festival, a 6-night all-black techno festival in Brooklyn, New York, and co-founder of the Dweller blog, a site for writings from a Black perspective. She grew up in London and has been based in New York City for the past 13 years. Without further ado, Frankie Decaiza Hutchinson.
Thank you, guys. Hello. Thank you so much for the lovely intro. Let me try and do this thing. Perfect. Super happy to be here. Yeah, whew, let me take a breath. It's deaf bonkers that I'm standing here at Harvard talking about raving. I did not think that way too many nights in clubs was going to take me here, but I'm very grateful to be able to share my story and experiences. I almost pursued a PhD within film studies, but switched gears and became a professional party goer and maker, not to inspire any of you, of course. Thank you, George, and faculty for inviting me and so many of my peers to speak. It's wonderful to see the Black origins of electronic music being taught, as that was missing for me in my education, and I'd confidently guess most people's education. As you know, my name is Frankie. I was born and raised in London, and I went to the University of Sussex in Brighton, where I got a degree in American Studies and Film Studies. I only studied the former because I wanted to study in the US, where I did a year abroad at University of California, Santa Cruz. Brighton, where I went to school for my undergrad, was a very liberal town on the southern coast of England. My experience there did not match what I expected. The liberal promise did not deliver me any liberation in that environment. One of those expectations was making friends and connections. But what was the most jarring initial experience was being extracted from London into a coastal town. A space where there was far less people that looked like me. And at that time, I wasn't aware of what that meant until I had a friend telling me to my face she was uncomfortable living with Black people. Stuck with that kind of confirmation that you don't belong in the space I was in. I was connected with other Black folks. And that's when my journey started in kind of learning about what can be experienced, creating in the margins for marginal identities. Now, kind of having established a sense of belonging in the margins, I ventured into the very literal margins of campus and attended my first free party. For those who aren't familiar with a free party, it's kind of a rave thrown without any permissions in a space that's not permitted with little to no budget. Got absolutely no budget whatsoever. They pretty much just propped up a couple of speakers behind campus and people just were partying. And I loved it. They would set up these speakers and sound systems behind campus in these massive fields. There was even like cows and sheep, and there was just like people just dancing. And I was like, this is me. So this was my first connection to electronic music in a physical sense. If you couldn't tell by what I do with my life now, I fell in love with it. I loved the lawless nature of it and how it cultivated connection between people I otherwise wouldn't connect with. At this time, I hadn't made any connections between me as a Black woman at a white university and the physical marginal spaces I was partying in. They were really disconnected for me at this time. It took my year at Santa Cruz, which I don't know if you know about that school. It's pretty famous for having Angela Davis teach there. Bell Hooks went there. So you can kind of gather what a lot of the students were like. And I learned a lot there and kind of was like, wow, all these texts have been missing from my life. So it was a really pivotal experience in my upbringing. So yeah, it took me years at Santa Cruz to be able to articulate my experience as a black woman and understanding what I was up against. You know, with this viewpoint, I created many spaces for marginal voices at university, within film festivals, photo galleries at university. I also co-organized a tent state, lifted from Rutgers University. I don't know if you are familiar with that. They basically created tents outside of the physical university space and did alternative learning in those tents. So they were teaching things that the school wasn't teaching. It was like a protest, basically. And we decided to adopt that same thing at Sussex. And we did that, and it was amazing. You know, one of the best things I've done in my life. It was really, really incredible. So these were kind of the foundations of like things I was doing before realizing that there was a big connection between me and parties. So yeah. So moving on, Discwoman. I moved to New York City in 2009, looking for electronic music, but couldn't find much that I gravitated towards until I found Bossa Nova Civic Club, which opened in 2012. It's like a 100-cap club located in Bushwick. It opened at a time when gentrification was not really popping in that neighborhood yet, so it was very much the many of clubs to come. It really started a wave out there, I would say, of nightlife. I met many great people there, and one of them was Emma Olsen, who DJs as Umfang. We became fast friends, connecting socially, but also politically. We noticed that women weren't being booked at the same rate as their male peers and wanted to do something about that. We then aligned with Christine Tran, who was organizing queer parties in Bushwick at that time. With her organizational expertise, we established Discwoman, which, for if you couldn't tell, it's a riff off Discman. Thanks. We were really, really happy about that. So we threw our first party, and it just took off. And almost 10 years later, we're still functioning as an artist agency. Our platform is more defunct now, and we just do the agency work now. In the midst of Discwoman, when I started to learn about the origins of techno and house music, Umfang told me of K-Hand and Jeff Mills. And I was literally like, who are you talking about? Like, I had no idea who these people were. And this just unraveled a whole history for me that I was completely unaware of. I'd found a home in this music for years and had no idea black people were the pioneers. But isn't that applicable to so many things, right? I felt robbed. I was mad. I was really, really annoyed and wanted to do something about it so others wouldn't feel robbed, but connected to and proud of our rich history here. It also raised the important and pivotal question of why aren't black artists being booked at the same rate as white artists? This felt especially egregious now, given the history of it. So, Dweller. So the first edition of Dweller was in 2019. I founded Dweller, but now I work alongside Ryan Clark, who you guys may have seen talk a few weeks ago, and Enyo Miho as the core programmers. So I used to be the booker at Bossa. So after hanging out at Bossa for 2012, they eventually gave me the job as booker there. I was like, finally, it's paid off. So I used to be the booker at Bossa Nova Civic Club, and then the idea of Dweller was planted because the DJ Ash Lorin, who I think maybe some of you are familiar with, she asked to play Bossa that February. So this was like the end of 2018. And she was like, I want to play, in February. And I was like, and that just spurred the idea of creating other events. Like, let's just make the whole week black. I mean, why not? Seems we have the talent and I have the keys to a club, so no one's going to tell me no. And they didn't. So that's kind of how it started. It started at a one-venue place, one-venue festival. The name Dweller is from the Drexciya album series, Journey of the Deep Sea Dwellers. And for those not familiar with Drexciya, They're a production duo from Detroit whose music was centered around a law they created of slaves that were thrown overboard during the Atlantic slave trade. They created a whole new world for themselves underwater, and Dweller Festival strives to kind of evoke a new world. The first edition was easy to put together. Well, it was just one club, so I was like, this is great. Today, I wouldn't answer that the same way. But we'll get to that. The first edition was easy to put together. That was one thing that really stood out to me. You know, at a certain point, you start like believing if there's a good reason why black folks aren't booked more and booked together. Like, are we difficult? Like, what's going on? What is the reason? So it being incredibly simple to book a festival with only black artists made the fact that they're not booked even more glaring and suspicious. What exactly is happening here? While it's obvious to some degree, there has always been a resistance from me to not use my energy solely to focus on the racism and shouting about it in this industry and how it impacts and restricts black expression, but focus on how we can cultivate an environment for black expression. I have a very bleak outlook on this industry. I believe it's incapable of making any substantial changes that can better the lives of black artists and communities in any sustainable way. I'm pretty jaded. In a typical sort of liberal practice, what this industry tends to do is kind of silo off a couple of us, which become kind of the poster people of diversity in publications, festivals, and beyond. They'll be like, we booked this person, so look, you know. There aren't many practices beyond that strive to include black artists or center black expression. You know, these are my observations, which are obviously very general, but yeah, when you've walked a mile in these shoes, you see it that way, you know. It felt really new to have an event focusing on black electronic talent. So because it's hard to articulate what it really felt like. So because of that, it's hard to articulate what it really felt like. I think black artists are so rarely centered within black electronic spaces that adjusting to that is quite a trippy experience. It's like very new. So moving on to the festival. A lot of the evolution of Dweller is us coming to terms with the fact there is a space for us. So each year just feels like we're adjusting more and more to the idea that actually there is room for us in this scene, in this industry. We have an example of what it could look like. What it could look like for black artists and partygoers to feel valued. The ritual for me is in continuing to make a space where we feel important and where we matter. How could we not want to return to a space that offers that in a world that offers us so little? After the first edition, it felt imperative to continue with Dweller. But I don't want it to sound like I was obligated. For me, it's a space for my own creative ideas, which is a space for expression in itself. The freedom is in not having to ask permission to book artists, but booking whoever we want. That feels liberating. That becomes an easy practice to adhere and commit to. And this, of course, has its challenges, which I'll come back to later. You know, just on that point of like having access to a space, like having the keys to be able to do what you want to do is so huge because predominantly, especially in New York, most of the promoters, most of the club owners are not black. Their interest isn't necessarily in you. So being in that position, and even as a black booker, I'm one of, very few. There's more now, which is great to see. And you see that change in the scene too. But yeah, that was a very instrumental part in being able to do this. Once we completed the first edition of Dweller, it was already obvious to me how we could expand it by including more venues and therefore being able to book more artists. So in our second edition, which took place in 2020, right before the lockdown, we got one in, that is the event which cemented the magic of what was happening. It just felt so promising and new. And one of the most striking parts of me was the amount of black folks who'd come in from other places. And one of these people was Ryan Clark, who I mentioned earlier, who came up from New Orleans and introduced himself to me. I was really struck by this. And I didn't know that Ryan would, a couple of months later, become the reason why the Dweller blog started, which I'll also come back to in a bit. The presence of perspectives from different regions in the country and beyond, the act of traveling so far to find a connection in a space like Dweller powered the event with such sacred, and preciousness that the uniqueness of that feeling just becomes addictive. Like, we just want to come back and see who turns up. We want to keep on coming back and seeing who turns up. So I'm going to go into talking about sort of the expansion of the festival and the expansion of this ecosystem and like how do we do that? I don't know the answer, by the way, but I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. So in order to serve this growing ecosystem, we want to expand, but not at the cost of intimacy of the venue and the festival. This can, of course, be challenging. But we focus on doing great programming at multiple smaller venues to try and keep that intimacy. But it's hard as the festival grows, so do its problems. These are some of the questions I don't have the answers to, if you want to hear them. How to retain a black crowd with growing interest among all people? How do we scale the event without losing a curatorial point of view? How do we accommodate the growing number of black artists who want to play? And that one is really particularly hard for me, especially in every Dweller season, because you always feel like you're leaving something out. But I'll get into that a bit later as well. And then sustaining this ecosystem. Financially, big one. How we support the festival and ourselves is a constant question for us. Currently, we don't have any brand sponsors or investors. We are open to donations, largely dependent on venue support for the talent. Most of our revenue comes from merchandise. It's difficult to focus on money efforts when you're in the throes of trying to produce it as well. Like, there just isn't enough time to do it all. And every year is the same. Another way we sustain the ecosystem is through the blog. Ryan Clark, who I mentioned above, came to me in the pandemic about starting a blog. So that became a place of thought and ideas in a time when we were unable to have events, which I think created a whole other tangent of the festival. It contextualized Dweller in a space of progressive, restless thought, ideas, development, and resistance. Then we have our design. Hassan Rahim took over doing design from 2020. And at the end, I'll go through the flyers and you'll be able to tell exactly when he took over because the first flyer looks really different than the others. So yeah, you can't divorce his artwork from the festival. And I thought a lot about artwork and flyers and festivals and like why they are so important to the space, to the production of a festival. And I look a lot at Hassan's work and like what it does to me when I look at it. And I just think it makes you just want to be there when you look at something beautiful like this. I think it might just be as simple as that. I mean, there's probably more interesting ways to explain that, but that's what I've come up with. But yeah, it's a really important component of it, and that's one of the things we take a lot of time on when we do this, and we even sell the poster and the art afterwards. Merch, having a piece of the festival to go home with is always our goal. So much room for improvement here as well, but that's also comes down to finance and time. Like, how do you sustain yourself? How do you pay everyone so you can actually pay someone to focus on developing merch. It's really difficult. We don't have the answer to that yet. We're still figuring that out. I don't know if we ever will. But that's part of this whole thing. Okay. And then internationally. So we did our first international event at Berghain this past year. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that club, but I would assume no, everyone. Okay. So Berghain is a club in Berlin in Germany. It's probably one of the most famous techno clubs in the world, I would say. It's known for not allowing any photography in the club. You're not allowed to take any pictures, and it's known for, people doing crazy things in there. Let's put it that way. But it's an iconic club, and if you ever go to Berlin, you should go there. But they also have a very selective door policy there, so not everyone gets in. So it has a lot of lore around that club too. But I've been there many times before putting our event on, and I really wanted to do something in that space because they have notably underbooked black artists there. And I was like, let's go. So we did it, and it was awesome. But, us expanding internationally, like, I think when I was talking earlier about, like, they silo off a couple of black artists, and then, that's their diversity thing. Like, that's not what we want Dweller to be. Like a stage at a festival, like, let's put the black artists there. Like, I cannot. So we're really strategic about where we want to show up and how we want to show up, and it has to make sense. Like, we have had lots of people reach out about wanting to include us, and like, you curate a stage. It's like, it's not really what we want to give, to be honest. And I also think it kind of undermines what we're trying to do. So yeah, that's, it's case by case, I would say. But there isn't like a huge international strategy. I would say if it makes sense, then we'll do it. But often it really doesn't there, actually. And Europe in particular is just, lots of things come to mind when I say that, but I'll save you all. It's a really hard place to be as a black DJ in Europe. There's a lot of revisionist history about it. I mean, I can tell you a story. I was at Deckmantel Festival a few years ago, and I was with a friend of mine, and this guy comes out of like nowhere. It's a white guy. And he's like, hey, where are you guys from? And we're like, oh, we live in the US. And he was like, oh, you guys have house and techno there? And I was like, okay, bye. Like these, so like, these like pockets of that. But there's lots of that there. There's like lots of people who have that perspective. And I'm not going to blame this guy for having that perspective because it's like what the scene produces. Like it makes sense that he would think that. I mean, to be honest, I thought that, going back to where I started. So, it's alarming to me, but it's also like, we're kind of cut from the same cloth in some ways. Hate to say it, but we are. So yeah, there's so much evidence of that. So yeah, it's hard to be there. So yeah, and then I wanted to sort of close up a little bit with how the effect of this on me mentally and what the work does to us in this ecosystem. So like, being one of the very few festivals that focuses on black expression, and especially electronic music, the pressure is on to represent that wholly and fully. So as the years progress, the talent pool becomes even bigger. The people who want to go becomes larger. How do we please everyone in this conundrum? I cannot see the lid with Dweller, which is both exhilarating and frightening. I constantly feel a sense of failure, which is crazy to even say, but the pressure to deliver is like insurmountable. And I will never fully be able to do so. So it's like accepting that, but also just like not being okay with it at the same time. So you're kind of wrestling with these emotions. So a big reason why I feel so much pressure is because the wider industry has failed Black artists so much that we have to pay the price for it. Like, I'm carrying that weight because they aren't delivering. I have to be the one, well, not me, but, you know, our community. We have to hold each other up. And we have to feel a sense of failure when we can't do that, which is kind of crazy. So when we fail, it becomes larger, you know? Like, I don't know if you guys heard of Nyege Nyege Festival in Kampala in Uganda. They had an edition last year, which was like widely reported as being really dysfunctional. And I really like resented the way that they pulled that festival out and said that about it. Because when you put that kind of story to an international lens, people are like, oh, God, of course the festival in Africa is terrible. You know what I mean? Like, it goes into people's racist ideas of that place already, when they're not even doing anything on the festivals that don't even book Black artists. You know what I mean? Like, why aren't you doing a piece on Tomorrowland and how it hasn't booked anyone Black? That's not true, but less people, you know. But you could write a bigger piece on festivals that have had a glaring oversight in not booking Black artists. But why focus on this one and its dysfunctions? I found that really egregious, honestly, and damaging and hard to. I didn't like that. So yeah, this year was a real challenge for me mentally. Just really put me through the ringer, physically too. I had all these outfits planned that didn't get worn at Dweller because I ended up wearing the same thing every day due to the chaos of it. I was really upset about this. I wore the same sweatpants. I probably wear the same ones now, actually, that just lasted me through the whole time, which, you know, is a little problem, but still, I was stressed. You know, on the flip side, closing out though, on the flip side, this work keeps me mentally afloat. You know, I feel creatively nourished by Dweller, despite how it can torment me. It is necessary, but it's also so fulfilling and expansive and limitless. And I'll close out there. Oh, wait, I won't. I'm going to take you guys through some of the lineups we've had. And I kind of want to take you through this because, you know, talking about sort of cultivating ecosystems and like what can happen, like some of the artists that we booked here, you know, I'm not saying that it's down to Dweller at all, but like, I think being nourished by your own like home city or being nourished by any kind of like platform, I think will really propel and instill confidence in artists and like your abilities. And some of the artists here have really just grown so much in the years that we've had Dweller, and it's like really beautiful to see that connection like between like what we're doing and what they're doing and how, community is powerful. So, oh wait, this is it, right? So this one, if you can guess who designed this, it wasn't Hassan Rahim. It actually was a friend of mine, Tyler, who is wonderful, who also took the picture of me. But this was when we were this is when we were piecing it together. You know, this was just like, let's do it, let's go. Yeah, exactly. Let's just get this stuff. And, you know, there might be names on here that you might recognize, like you see Ash Lorin, you know, D Diggs, Ace Man, like people, it's just like, this was so beautiful to see. Avaquia, you know, Dream Crusher, like all these really, really great people who were just like down to play. And at that time, we didn't have any budgets. Like people were playing for bar split, you know, which I can't do that now. I don't want to do that now, and I don't think that that's right. But that's what people were up. They just wanted it, you know, and that was a cool energy. But it's not really a sustainable one if you're growing a festival. But it was a great, great first event. And then This was 2020, so we kind of upped our graphics game a little, as you can tell. This was our first Club with the Sun, and this was the first one where we had a second venue, and that second venue was Nowadays. I'm not sure if some of you guys know that club. Cool. And they partnered, and they did the event with Stingray and Analog Soul, I think, and I don't remember, but I think that's true. And I just remember like I was like, because there was a couple of things happening on the same night. I remember arriving at Stingray, and I think I just missed his set, but I saw all these people like leaving the dance floor like they just like left an exorcism, And I was like, I missed the whole thing, and I was like, whoa. They're like, oh my God, all these black people just like coming. I was like, okay, cool. We probably should do this again, So that was what was really like, oh. And I remember I also went to every single event this year as well, but there was way less than there are these years, so it's not that impressive, but still. So yeah, that was 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And then this was 2021. This actually wasn't designed by Hassan Rahim. This was designed by Bryant Wells, who also works with Hassan too. And I love this artwork. But this was done in 2021 when the clubs weren't really properly opened. We did it on the Juneteenth weekend. And we called it a 2.5 because it wasn't a full festival, so we thought it was kind of cute. It's cute, right? Thank you. Thank you. And you also might be able to name some names here, but this was actually just New York focused, I think. Yeah. Because it was the pandemic, so no one was really traveling. And this is just homegrown, It's cool to see just like the local talent. You could just really make something on the strength of what's around you, which I loved. And then we have, what year is this now? What movie was that? 2022. Okay, yeah, thanks. It says it right there as well. Okay, so this is one of my favorite artworks as well. And the art on this is particularly moving to me because, the pandemic is obviously forever going, but it was kind of, clubs were back open. We were re-immersing ourselves. I don't know if that's a word, but you know what I'm saying. Back into club culture. And we just this sentence just hit for us, How do we find each other? We needed to connect. And I just love the way that all the names are kind of coming out of the noise. I just love this whole piece of art. It's so beautiful. And all of these, you might recognize some of these names here too. This was a really, really special one. This is like the first one where we worked with multiple venues. I can't remember which ones. This was the year where Bossa Nova had a fire. So we couldn't hold Dweller there anymore. It was crazy, random fire. And then we did it at another club down the street, and it was great. I can't remember the name of the club now, but it was great. Rash, that was what it's called. And that club actually ended up having a fire as well, like a couple months later, which is just absurd. And they're literally 2 blocks from each other. It was crazy, but for completely different reasons, the fire occurred. That's just a side note, but yes, it was crazy. And we had it at Mood Ring as well, I think. This was a crazy, amazing year. Loved it. So this was the beginning of the slow expansion and us being like, oh my God, our minds, let's expand them even further. Like, what other music do we need? And actually this year I got so many people, separate people come up to me and say, Frankie, there was no Jersey club at Dweller. Frankie, there was no house music at Dweller. Frankie, there was no techno. I was like, well, then what the hell was playing? I don't know what was going on. Like, what was at Dweller then? If there was nothing, all these I'm like the complaint center as well. So I was like, what music was there? But it's just, I also love those kind of comments as well. So especially with the Jersey Club thing, we were like, okay, let's go. Because that is glaringly missing from this. And so impactful and important and needs to be represented. So that takes us into this year. And this is probably my favorite artworks of all of them. It's kind of harder to read, I know, I'm sorry, all the names, but I can show you up close. We actually had another version that was more legible that we put next to it because this was more of the art piece. So it was easier to read for people, but I didn't post that, I'm sorry. This, I wanted to mention for the last one what was really important actually before I get into this one was that this was like the first time we had a big Detroit presence, and that was underground resistance. And that was just like mind-blowing to us at that time. And then that's when we started to really... In fact, I went to a talk of underground resistance, and they brought up the term intergenerational, and it just stuck with me. And I was like, that's exactly what we need to bring into Dweller, an intergenerational perspective. Like, the power of like different ages and like generations coming together with their music and seeing each other, like that is explosive to me. Like that just lit a fire. And then when we got to have underground resistance, do a 6-hour set on the Sunday, it was crazy. It was like, whoa. It was kind of like the Stingray moment, but like another one of those where you're like, oh my God, this is insane. And before that we had Huey Mnemonic play, and he's a younger Detroit artist. So it was like the contrast of these two generations of Detroit. It was just, I'll never forget it, ever. So that brings us again, I'll bring us back again to 2023, where we had Jeff Mills join us. And that, coming from where I was saying at the beginning, who's Jeff Mills? And now I'm like working with him. I mean, it's magical to me. It really is magical to me. I don't know how else to describe it. Like these things it's like beautiful. This is what life is about. And him coming and just being up for being in the discussion and doing his own thing. And he was just like around as well. That's also the thing I love, like people just showing up. And this was our crazy, crazy lineup, which was an amazing year again. And so I'll take you into, this is our teaser for this coming year. So you all should come. It's a little plug at the end, but I can't tell you who's playing yet because that has not been finished yet. But it will be announced in January. But this again is Hassan's work too. It's kind of like a double A side he's going for here. Originally it was 5 days. Now we're going to 6 days this year. I wish I could say some of the things that we're doing, but I'm not going to. Sorry. You have to come. But yeah, that's kind of where I'll close out with this little teaser. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Well done. That was fantastic. Oh, please stay up if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
It's time to grill you.
I was like, see ya.
Well, thank you so much, Frankie, for the generosity of memory and spirit of the talk. We really do appreciate it. And so much of what you're sharing touches upon a lot of things that we discuss in our own class. And it's nice to kind of think about it in the specific context of New York City, the specific context of right now, this very moment. I guess I'll just want to note that if anyone wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. We have a mic that will go around. Our wonderful folks at ESS will help out on that front. But I will kick us off because one question that's kind of on the top of my mind is this sort of dichotomy of labor of love versus compensated labor. But then it made me think, why is so much labor of love uncompensated?
Oh, story of my life. It's a really, really, really big question. Like, I don't know. I guess there's just I don't know how to answer that, honestly. It's really hard. I feel, because I kind of live that, I still just don't even know why that is the case. Let me think. I found moving through this industry as a person who's like really interested in being compassionate has been challenging, actually. That's not what gets you further in this industry is being a good, decent person. It really isn't. You kind of have to cut off a part of that, I think, to get to the other levels, I guess. That is obviously not always the case, and that does sound a little cynical when I'm saying it like that, because that's not a universal experience. But I would say that leading with love isn't what gets you paid or gets you ahead, or leading with care isn't what's valuable in most times. And I think that's also why I've gotten to such a bitter point of view with this industry, because I feel like, I'll give you a great example actually. When the pandemic hit, we, on our Discwoman platform, asked people for donations to help our artists who were struggling. Like, it was that time, everyone was scared, no one had work. And we got completely dragged through the mud on this. People called us disgusting. How could you ever do that? Just like awful, awful things. It made me so depressed, because all I'm thinking about is like, I feel like I've only done good things for people. I've only helped people. I feel like does none of that matter all of a sudden? None of it mattered. People wanted to create their whole narrative about us, that we were taking money. It was just crazy, like none of that pays forward anything. Doing stuff for people, caring, thinking you're being some kind of support system all of these years just had absolutely no bearing on the judgment that people were throwing at us, the abuse that we got. And it was so depressing. And I think a lot of my bitter point of view comes from that pivotal point, to be honest with you. I started to look at things completely differently, and I was like, I'm not giving y'all anything anymore. I'm just going to focus on our community and not look outwards for anyone to give us shit, honestly. So, yeah, it doesn't pay. And you actually just get more and more abuse for it, I think, actually, which is, a sad truth.
Right. And it seems like, one of the tensions in your talk is memory.
Yeah.
And remembering what was ours.
Yeah.
And coming back to it.
Exactly.
But then there is, in many industries, a trend and a sort of mantra around diversity, equity, and inclusion that sort of stands in tension with that memory, or at least the roots of the music. Mm-hmm. And this sort of catch-22, you might call it, or a sort of dilemma of, to get paid is to go to the source of capital, yet the source of capital thinks it's the source of the culture.
Right.
So what do we think about the DEI-ification of the festival and the siloed stage as a way of rectifying that?
I love that. The siloed stage, that's brilliant, yeah. Oh, God. I mean, in all honesty, like when we were doing Discwoman, we were almost like the poster people for that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, we were completely siloed, and Discwoman, do a stage, Discwoman, do that. And we were up for it because we just went into it just like, woo, this is good. But then things like the experience I told you happen at the end of that, where you're like, we've done all this work, we've promoted so many women, we've done all this. We thought we were putting in good work where people would respect us at the end. And that's not what we got. So I think artists should do that if they're getting paid, and go for it. Like, I don't have any judgment about that. I think you absolutely should get paid, get the experience, do what you need to do. But I don't think it's any more meaningful than that. That's my honest opinion. I really don't. If a white festival is doing a black stage or a women's stage or whatever the hell stage they want to do, the silo stage, it's transactional. It's not a meaningful thing. I don't think there's anything sustainable that happens after the fact. It's for them to look good, which I think most Black artists understand to some extent that that's what might be happening. But we also want to get paid, so whatever, So that is that approach too, which I also get. I'm not trying to judge anybody in this context, because everyone needs to survive, and there's only a few amount. There's such little crumbs that we can have, and I don't think people should be passing judgment on. Some gigs you can pass judgment for sure, but well, yeah, we can talk about it another time. But you need to get paid. I get it. Yeah.
So we'll wait to see if there's questions in the audience. But just building off that point, what do we think about I wonder if you could just give us some texture about bookers themselves and the tension between community of bookers and maybe the competitive aspect of booking. Could you delve a little bit into that?
Yes. Booking. Yeah. I mean, I became an agent out of necessity, because that's what I saw was missing for marginalized artists. So that's why I did it. And it was a tough start. I mean, I didn't know a lot of the terminology. I had no idea what things meant. And, it was kind of embarrassing a lot of the time, but kind of fought through it. And people assume you don't know what you're doing as well, which I didn't. But still, that's not the point. They assumed I didn't. But I do now. But people still assume that, So even booking Dweller this year, it's the way that you're spoken to is quite crazy by certain agents as well. But yes, it does create tension, and I often get asked to represent people, and I don't have the capacity to do it, and that's also really hard as well, to say no to people that you want to support. That can be a really difficult component, and that's similarly reflected in the festival as well. We can't book you for the festival this year. That is an emotional ache for me, and it's hard to do that. But it's not smart to take on more than you can do, because you'll end up hurting that person even more than if you just say no. So I've had to be really smart in my choices, and just being if I take this other person on who I would love to, they are going to be left short because I don't have the capacity for it. So coming to terms with that has helped me a lot with my anxiety and stuff like that, and just being realistic with people. And it's good. It's very effective to be direct with people and direct with people in your community and tell them what's up with you and them. And honestly, that's been really respected with people that I've talked to about this. Yeah, that has been hard. And then, I think being one of a few Black bookers, people just don't identify booking agent with you, so they're always surprised that you're doing it. Well, at least at the beginning when I started as well. So it has been quite challenging. And, you're also, it's emotional work as well, because this is people's money, so you take on a lot of that. If you can't get what they want, they're going to be really upset about it. So you take that on too. So it's difficult. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but
I think it does.
Okay, great.
We'll queue up this question in the audience, but to build off the point that you just said, have you learned anything intergenerationally on this point? Because a lot of our class has been thinking about distribution and the sort of transition from, for example, Detroit techno to Tresor and Berlin, and sort of the increasing popularity of techno and electronic music forms outside of these states, and then the issue of royalties not necessarily being borne out. Obviously, booking nightclubs is maybe a little different in that sense, but have you learned anything intergenerationally on this point? Any stories from some of the greats?
I feel like it's really, really great to see some of the older acts being booked again, and that being in kind of vogue right now. That's awesome. There is a little bit of a silo nature about it as well, of course. But it's also how are Black artists supposed to like survive? You know, you have to kind of be siloed to some extent. You know, in this same underground resistance talk, actually. Cornelius, who manages underground resistance, he said, the reason why Jeff Mills moved to Paris was because he could get more accolades and recognition for his work there. The US doesn't even like recognize that techno and house is made from, there's nothing that recognizes that. You can look at the Grammys and see what that means here. So it's, it's great, but it's also I'm cynical about it too. I don't know how many things that is now, but I don't know. Yeah.
Great. And we have a question in the audience.
Hi. Oh my gosh, hi.
Hi.
My name is Allure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
I'm very excited, so please, if I take a minute to speak, that's why.
You're gonna take your time.
Thank you so much. I'm a musician and a performer, and something that I've been thinking about a lot as I've been writing music recently is part of it is for my thesis work, and there's a lot of questions about the way that I'm going to present it. And I'm very passionate about underground spaces, and I eventually want to be a part of like creating those spaces as well. But I guess I've never met that's not true. I want to know if you have any advice for what it looks like maybe not an entire festival, because
You looked at me and were like, absolutely not.
No. Eventually, I'm just a broke college student, and I am not there yet. Give me a couple years, let me graduate. And I will see you in the
festival, please.
There you go.
Yeah,
but right now, I guess what advice you have for cultivating community space and event, even if it's just one singular event, especially because I want to be really if that is something that I end up doing this year, I want to be really intentional about it.
Of course.
And so there's questions of do I want to do it through the university, and what would that look like, and would that actually speak to what I want to speak to, what I would it serve the communities that I want to serve, or would I have to just things like that.
I hear you, yeah. Well, it seems to me that you have all the intention right now, and you could probably make it tomorrow, honestly. I think there's a sense of people kind of overthinking things as well and not doing it because you're kind of I want to make it right. But the imperfections is what kind of where you kind of find the weird and cool stuff sometimes, I was talking to you actually, Daniel and George, about when we did Discwoman in our first year. We did it in Boston actually. That was our first outside of New York party that we did, and we had a party in someone's house where the decks were on a sink. And I was like, cool, this is great. So just people throwing things together and just where the focus is just in making something happen. It's a boiling thing that happens, and it's so cool to see people just go for it. So I would say don't talk yourself get too specific with it. Just do one thing. And you also will you'll also find out from doing that one thing what you don't want to do next time as well. I'd say keep it quite simple, book a few people. I would love to come. But you should, just do it. That's my best advice, honestly. You just do it. You got it. You got it. I don't need anything else. You don't need anything from me, to be honest with you. You already got it, girl.
I don't know who to give this to. Oh, yeah.
Yep, next question.
Thank you so much for the talk. I really enjoyed this. I have a question based off of the community and the intergenerational nature of the festivals. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what it's been like working within this like community that you and like your cohort has created, especially with Black venue owners and other booking agents and DJs. Just yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's one Black venue owner that we work with. None of them are Black. I mean, I think I can think of maybe one. I mean, there are more than one space in New York, but one space that would be more techno leaning that is Black owned. I mean, it's just really few and far between. In terms of bookers, that's... I'm like, shit, are there? Yeah. There are, actually. There are a few, actually. I would say that's become actually more common, which is really, really cool to see. And that absolutely helps the process, you know, because I think, you know, not that every Black person is interested in this kind of thing, of course not. But I think it does lend a certain empathy to what we're doing, which eases things. I think it's easier for somebody to see what it is we're trying to create. Yeah, it's been, honestly, like, everybody's just wanted to work with us. That's what's been really cool about it. You know, like, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but this is what I'm saying with you. It's like, you think that like something's going to hold you back, but nothing was holding us back. And I was like, oh, you guys want to do it too? Okay. Oh, you guys want to do it too? Okay, cool. You know, we actually dropped a venue this year because of, you know, XYZ, BS. And we introduced a new one. And just the difference in the way this venue was, it was amazing. They were so excited to work with us. It's such a nice feeling, like being wanted in your own city. Like, that felt really good, because you kind of felt like you always think it's the opposite. Like, I always thought like, oh, it's going to be hard to do something like this, which it is obviously for many reasons. But in terms of people being interested in what you're doing, people are excited. So we don't really have a problem with acquiring venues or anything like that. Within the community, it's people generally feel excited about it. But I also always worry about, one of my concerns with doing Dweller is creating hostility in the community in some way. Like, you know, we've booked this person twice, but you haven't booked me, you know? This kind, what does that create in our scene? Is that actually helpful? Am I responsible for that? Should we keep doing this if it's creating this hostility between Black artists? You know, it's not something that is really prevalent, but I feel like it could be, if that makes sense. And I think there are, and we have had some kind of examples of that too. And that is the worst thing for me, honestly. But I really don't know what the right answer is to that question. Like, you know, I think you do continue, but it feels damaging as well. So it's hard, very hard.
Yeah, I think one of the parts of your talk that resonated with a lot of people online was the issue of generating income.
Yeah.
And in our class, we read about the juice bars in Chicago, which were, many people don't know, these also sort of unofficial spaces, oftentimes unregulated spaces that typically didn't serve alcohol.
Right.
And someone online, Gum asks, one obstacle I've been thinking about regarding nightlife is divesting from the alcohol industry as a primary source of money. Yeah. Would love to hear your thoughts. Can it work? Is it worth being a priority right now?
It's interesting. Oh, God, I don't know, honestly. That's hard for me to answer, but there has been an example of a party in Berlin did an alcohol-free night. And they said it was great. They said it was really, really great. I don't know what world that would be possible within a club. I think if you wanted to do something like that, which I think is very interesting to explore, it would have to be done outside of a club, I think, because to be honest, I think a lot of people don't always understand how fine the line it is for clubs to go under. They are really running on small amounts. Like, most of the clubs don't break even every night. They're always in the red, especially the sort of mid-sized to small clubs that we work with. So unfortunately, alcohol is a big part of how they can make money there, which, sucks. I wish we could kind of be more. But I also have seen a lot of clubs introduce more non-alcoholic options as well, which I think has been really great. And depending on the party, some people just drink less in certain environments. So I think that it definitely is a world in which that could exist. I don't think that we're there yet. Yeah.
Another idea that we kind of explore in our class is this idea of distance. And there was a part of your talk that was quite evocative to me, which was, traveling so far to be together. I think something you said. Can you meditate a little bit more about that? I mean, does New York have this sort of unique sort of importance as sort of epicenter of culture for people that might be a little bit more displaced, who might not even be able to afford New York outside of a temporary trip? What does it mean to create space that might just be 5 or 6 days, but is so deeply important in that sort of...
Yeah, that's crazy. I was like, I said that, and then I remembered I did say that. Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I didn't know it was even a thing until it was happening at the festival. I was really, really shocked when I found out somebody had traveled to Dweller. It was really a shocking thing. And now that's why we do the Save the Date, so that people who want to travel there, it's become a part of the thing now. People want to travel there, they can make plans to do so. So yeah, New York, we are privileged in many ways to have, a somewhat functioning, decent subway system. It's better than a lot of places. So you can walk a lot of places. It's just, you can bike. There's so many ways to get around. And there's lots of inexpensive ways to get around as well. And so that is a huge way. That's a huge part of how you can cultivate a community and a scene. Is by being able to go places and Bossa, Market Hotel, Mood Ring, Paragon, they're all so close to each other. That is what builds a community in a lot of ways. So it's understandable that people are drawn to wanting to come into that. A lot of artists move from other places there to progress in their careers and stuff like this. So it makes sense that people would want to do that. So yeah, it's other places in the US just don't have that same scene. They're really... this is going to be hard to say, actually. I think I'll say it like this. New York boasts one of only a few really big nightlife scenes in the US, and out of all the cities, this country is gigantic. That is crazy that it's really just one and a couple of other places. But New York is really the one, right? So if you think about people who don't have access to that, I would come to Dweller too. But that's also hard for people to do. So, what do we do for people in those situations? I'm not sure.
So we have more questions in the audience. We'll queue that up in this corner. But while we get the mic in that person's hand, Sarah Online asks, oh, you have the mic. Okay, let's get to it. Thanks for showing the mic.
Hi.
Thanks, Frankie, so much for your talk. I was hoping you could kind of discuss a bit more. You talked about the community and the scenes, and so outside of the DJs and the bookers and the venues, who is showing up? What does the audience look like? And have you seen an evolution in this since, for younger listeners, electronic dance music has kind of come back onto the scene for them? And is the audience intergenerational? But who is there? Like, what?
That's a great
what are you
question.
seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. A very pressing one. Well, you know, like I think towards the end of my talk, I was kind of touching on this a little bit, but like, with growth comes so many problems. One of them, is particularly this year, was a huge influx of white participants, which had quite a... Some of our black attendees had a lot to say about, which is understandable. But we're like, what do we do about this? But prior to that, but there also was like loads of black people too, but it's kind of like, what do we do here? But prior to that, in the beginning and the first dweller, like it was mostly black. I mean, it was really crazy to see your like kind of simple idea produce the result that you wanted. You know, black people do come out to support black artists. That's cool. Yeah, we're just like, okay, A, plus B, blah blah, whatever. That was my mathematics, by the way. It was really, yeah, it was great. I mean, the crowd was really great. I mean, talked about the international people, the people there. It's really great. I've met so many people through Dweller. You know, I heard about a love story that was created through Dweller. You know, like things like this, really beautiful things. A couple, actually, which always moves me to tears, obviously. So, yeah, people connecting with each other in different ways is just so beautiful. And there was so much of that. But I'd say this year in particular probably had the whitest crowd that we've had. And, we thought about what do we do to encourage, or not encourage, but prioritize our black attendees within this black space? Like, what can we do? And we're still thinking about that. We're still meditating on what the best way forward is there. We don't want it to be like too condescending in any way. We want it to come off natural. There's lots of ways. That's just something that we're really thinking about and wanting to go into intentionally, but I don't fully have the answer to it right now. Because the other part of it is that we also need these parties to be full. And we want people to come. And we want clubs to not lose money. So there's all these other stresses about it as well, which doesn't mean that they're necessarily mutually exclusive, but they are things that are going on at the same time when we're thinking about how best to approach this. But you had a part of your question about sort of like elder audiences and like the kind of diversity in like that way. I think it could be way more in terms of intergenerational people coming through. I think what we do just kind of, because of where we're coming from, just organically lends itself to a younger crowd, but I would love it to be more. But, nowadays the club, I would say in particular, is really just already quite diverse in that way. So when it comes to our programming there, I would say that probably best reflects that. But some of the other clubs are definitely less like that, I would say. But I love that too. That's my honest answer for you. Yeah.
Another question on the front here.
Hi. Thank you again,
Hey,
Frankie.
yeah.
I'm curious, so how did you structure Dweller? Because it sounds like it sort of does occupy a space in like the formal economy. So did you have to set up, like, how did you make the transition from informal, these are my friends, we're doing a thing, to this is a thing? And what kind of a thing is it?
Don't know. It's still very informal, actually. We work. Everything relating to finance goes through the clubs, so it's kind of like, it's almost like promoting a party that's across multiple venues. That's kind of how it's structured in a technical sense. But we want to be in a place that's a little bit more formal, just trying to get that together. Yeah, it's challenging, and I think we definitely need that in terms, if we're going to have to grow for growth purposes. Sorry, I'm like slurring my words at this point. That's a interesting question. I'm like, we kind of just exist, and then I see the clubs as kind of sort of manifestations of all the different ideas, I guess, and they kind of hold us up. And then when we don't have the clubs, the blog is our structure. That's kind of it. I wish I had a better answer, though, for that, but I don't.
And another question right behind you.
Hi, Frankie. Thank you so much for this talk. This is such a nice way to end the semester. I think whenever your bio was read earlier, somebody said that Dweller is also a space for parity to emerge. Did I hear that word used correctly?
I think it was Discwoman with parity in terms of pay. Was that what was mentioned?
Parity.
Yeah, parity.
Great.
I think that's what was said, right?
I think that is,
parity,
now that
yeah,
you said that, that makes more sense. So just pivoting the question away from parity, I'm just thinking of other terms that emerged during your talk about like what the atmosphere of Dweller is aspiring to be or actually creating. And you mentioned things like freedom, connection. When you get back to the aspirational mode of where you would like to see the festival go in the future, what are the things that you want people who experience it to leave with, or what do you want to kind of birth into the world through this platform specifically?
Wow, yeah. I mean, my ideas are like kind of endless, and it actually drives me a little bit insane because every year I'm like, oh God, I can't do that. Okay, fine. You know, we want to include all people with generations, all different kinds of music, and also like all different artists of like fame and expertise levels too. Like we want this to be a space that intertwines the different levels of Black artists as well. And I see that being a really big part of expansion, without our budget expanding, but we want these people to come. We are always wondering whether we want to go bigger with some of these spaces, but I don't think that's what we want to go. Like this, you know, I'm kind of toying between sharing something kind of personal with Dweller this year because it kind of spoke to what the atmosphere gives and why it's just so community driven and protective. Like on the last day of Dweller, I found out I was losing one of my closest friends to cancer in the middle of the festival, and that completely shifted the environment I was in. But I was held so tight with the people around me. And it was really remarkable. And that, I was like, oh, nothing, I haven't missed anything, actually. I'm still here with everybody. And we're just going through it. And like, that's what the event should be, you know? And I just want to create more of that, like all the time, where people can have a breakdown or like, I'm not saying it's a bit extreme, but you know what I mean? Just like suffer in that environment too if they need to. Like, it's not just about like us being on a high or whatever. It's like also like we have so much trauma going on as well. And it's important. I want that to be the environment that people feel cared and loved and not ostracized in any way. I don't know if I have full control over that, but that is what we want to strive to do. And I think with making the festival bigger and bigger, I think it can kind of take that more personal, intimate, like, part away from it. And, you know, and then bringing just more voices into what that intimacy is, basically, is what we want to do, you know? We want it to be special. We want it to be precious. We want it to be sacred. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Sorry, I've got a bit all sidetracked.
Everything. If there's one thing this lecture series has shown, it's everything.
Okay, thank you guys. Well, this is actually an example of that as well. You know, like that was, you know, deeply personal thing to say, but it felt like I could do that, you know, and that's what you want to cultivate, environments where people don't feel weird about things like this. So this is life, you know.
And I think one of the parts of your talk that I really love is the care that you bring not just to people, but to the craft of the festival. So the very end of your talk, the focus on art is very important. I think we're here in the Hip Hop Archive. As you can tell, there's a bit of an obsession with objects here. And, you know, one of the tensions when we think about history is, you know, ephemera are so easy to lose. so you prioritizing selling the posters, for example, is a way of sort of disseminating the culture
Right.
beyond a monetary kind of motive. But can you talk a little bit more about how you feel about art making, and the ephemerality of a lot of art associated with the club?
You know, I'm consistently stunned by how many talented people that I know, like, and how many people make music. I don't know how to make a beat at all. But for me, I like that position because it all feels like magic to me. I'm like, how did you do that? And I love being in this position of not really knowing how the hell they did anything. I don't, you know, I've done events for years, and with Discwoman and stuff, I don't know how to plug in a CDJ. I have no idea. I would just sit there and watch them do it, and I don't know, which is not a thing I'm necessarily proud of, but I am really into like magic and just like things like happening, even though they're like, we had to work really hard on this. I'm like, it's magic, you know? I'm that annoying person, but still. Haven't learned anything about DJing. I don't know how to mix two tracks together. Like, I barely know what a BPM is. I really have no technical approach to this at all. So for me, it just all feels so like majestic to me. Like and I love connecting with it that way. And like seeing my friends, in particular, I guess, play their music, do a live set, whatever, and people respond to that. It's just, there's nothing like that, you know? Like, you can't define that beauty. And like there were moments like that at Dweller this year when OK Williams, who amazing DJ from London, she played the 6-hour set at Nowadays this year. And so like, you know, the year before was Underground Resistance, and this year we went with a younger act, was OK Williams. So it was their kind of like, you play for 6 hours, and she did. And it was incredible. I mean, it was just so moving, the way people would respond to her, and just the body. It was like people were like I said about the exorcism, it was that. Like, it was just so spiritual. So we now call that set on Sundays the church set. Yeah, that's the church day. And I can't wait to unleash who we have next year, but you'll see. So, yeah, I don't know. I find it so hard to describe music, the process, anything about that, because it only reaches me in a magical way, and that I just want to cling on to forever. That's it.
Yeah, it's clear. It's clear. It's ephemeral and ineffable.
Exactly.
So one person says, well, tons of people are saying, "We love you, Frankie." Just want to let you know that. So there's a lot of love. There's a lot of labor, but there's also a lot of love. And
Where are the haters?
Exactly. Where are the haters? One of them writes, I have all the posters framed and hung up in my apartment. I get a lot of great questions about them.
Oh my God, stop. Hassan's work is amazing.
So I wonder if we can end on this question, unless we have another one. No? Yeah?
I was going to ask what your favorite party is.
So Laura asks, what's your favorite party, or was?
Like ever? Not out, one that I did, or just in general?
I bet you want to.
Okay. It was definitely Unter in New York City, in some abandoned offices. I used to do the door at this party. It was crazy. That was the best party. Yeah, that was amazing. That was it. I can fill in more of the blanks after if you want, but that's the top line.
And Sarah asks, have you witnessed any positive changes in the wider industry since you founded Dweller?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh when I said that. I have actually. I think a lot more. I feel like a lot more Black folks playing techno and house, and are being booked for that. I think they're being, especially in New York, given a lot more space to do that as well. Hard to say about internationally, honestly, but within the New York scene, for sure, it's completely changed. I mean, when, at the beginning of our talk, I was like, I couldn't find any techno when I moved here in 2009. Now, there's just an influx. Like, you could find so much. So absolutely, there's change. Obviously, I have my own bitterness, but but you can also look at it quite objectively and see that there's way more room for Black artists these days, which is awesome.
And we actually do have a moment just for one more question that has come up a number of times in the chat, which is, well, one is kind of maybe tongue-in-cheek, which is there a guest list? But I think we can expand the
Email
question.
us. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I think we can expand the question and think about equity in this sense too, which is one person, Kara, writes, I had friends go and saw on Twitter the event this year had a lot of white people come out interested in the event. And Kara asks, how can we ensure that Black people are prioritized with tickets? But I think attached to that,
what I was talking about earlier.
is-
That's what we're kind of meditating on at the moment.
Right.
But we are going to figure out some ways to do this. So yeah, just watch this space, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I guess beyond Dweller, what do you think about the sort of practice of tiered pricing as a way of ensuring equity into the space?
I love it on its face. In its practicality, I think it can be difficult. But that's kind of what we're meditating on, I guess, is that very question. I'm not sure. We've never tried it. So I think we're always down to try things. You know, that's what I was kind of saying to you. You just have to try it and see what happens. And that's where you learn, I guess. So we'll see.
Excellent. I guess on that point, please join me in please thanking Frankie for sharing so much of her experience.
Thank you so much.
And for those online, thank you for joining us. Please tune in for our December 5th talk. We'll see you next time. Have a good evening.